can all join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you for showing up. Anyone here for the first time tonight? Those who are here for the first time, what brings you here?
She asked me to come.
She asked you, it's the first time she asked you? Yeah, nice. And did you kick and scream the whole way, or you just said, oh, I'm in?
I'll be honest, I don't even know what this is.
It's funny. I was just going to ask. That's so great. I was seriously just going to ask you, like, and I usually say it jokingly, like, do you even know where you're going? And
I have a rough idea.
Rough idea. Yeah. I'm just going to leave it at that, even though this sounds like way too much fun to go into. Yeah, I do. I say that all the time when someone say so-and-so brought me. I said, did they even tell you where you were going? And normally they do, but in your case, you really didn't. Yeah.
I found out like 45 minutes ago.
Nice. And you're sitting in the front too. So if you were to sneak out, everybody's going to know. You're kind of trapped, man. Yeah. The window, just unlatch it. And well, glad you're here.
Thank you.
What else? The first time. What brings you here? Anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, I started reading books like a few years ago, and last week was the first time that I came to the temple, and I've been enjoying it a lot so far.
Nice.
My meditation is better. I'm like more joyful, I would say.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Good. I'm glad. Well, welcome. Glad you're here. Yeah. What else? First time.
I'm trying to get refocused on my meditation
Yeah.
practice.
So you have a practice and just kind of stopped?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It happens, right? What else? Anybody first time want to share why they're here? Yeah.
Exploring spiritual options and meditation or something.
Nice. Good. Well, welcome. Anybody else?
My therapist said I should try it out.
Yeah. Yes. So that's my probably one every 3 classes I make. It sounds like a joke because everybody laughs, but I say it very seriously. I always say that half the people who are here are in therapy. The other half are therapists, and half of the therapists are in therapy. But I mean that very seriously, is that a lot of people get sent here for exactly that reason. My therapist said I should go here. It's a really wonderful complement to therapy. I think as you begin to learn about meditation, Buddhist practice, and you kind of look at what therapy does, you see how they play well together. You see how they're very different. One should never replace the other. One is not better or worse than the other. They both, like I said, they complement each other, but also very different. And I think in time, for those who've been around this a while, you begin to see that therapy, you're really digging into a lot, dealing with trauma, past, childhood, whatever led you here, right? Then there's those of us who probably should be in therapy and have never done therapy, but whatever led us here, there's a lot to dig into. And then with Buddhist practice, it's really this approach of, okay, well, I'm here. So can I just be present and enjoy this moment? And if I sit and I process my whole life for my whole life, I'm going to be processing my whole life for my whole life. And that can get exhausting sometimes. So sometimes the beauty of just sitting in the present moment and finding gratitude and appreciation for simply just being alive and being here and being okay with that. That also brings can bring a lot of joy. And very often, not for everyone, but very often, many people lack gratitude and appreciation for all that we have in our lives. So this practice of learning to stay present and be with life as it is really starts with gratitude and appreciation for simply being alive and being here. And whatever, crazy, maddening experiences we've all gone through, you've survived them all so far. You wouldn't be sitting here right now. So, all right. So with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. To those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thank you for showing up. Feel free to say hello on the chat box there. A couple things to tell you before we begin, especially for those who might be new or sitting for the first time. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. I mean, you don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, just trying to relax the shoulders as well, sitting up straight. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. It just means you have an itch or your leg hurts. So simply adjust and get comfortable. And again, if you are brand new, you're not going to shut your mind off. It's not going to stop racing. It won't go blank and you will not think nothing. Your mind will continue to race. I'll say things periodically to remind you that you're lost in thought or wake you up because you have fallen asleep. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. We'll start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, feel them fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from your practice. Just sitting, breathing. learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, and no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move, and most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's not from anything I said. It's not from how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's not from the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment. And our present moment very often is filled with conflict, chaos, difficulties, and challenges. That's what we get. This practice is learning to be with life as it arises and not running from it, which is where so many people spend much of their lives, running from all the problems. You keep running, you get tired. This practice is learning to be aware of what we think, what we say, and what we do in each moment, regardless of how pleasant or unpleasant a situation is. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. And that's all. It's not that complicated. It's really hard to do every moment. And that's why we call it a practice. We often spend so much of our day and our time trying to control, fix, manipulate, and change everybody else, hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they do this, wishing they do that. So much time complaining about the actions of others. And I'm not saying the actions of others are not important. They are. The world is a mess. And with kindness and compassion, I hope we all do whatever is required to make the world less of a mess. But the world has always been a mess, and the world will always be a mess. And this practice is not about changing anyone else. It's not about getting anyone else to do anything or be any other way or fix anything else. This practice is how do you react to what's going on in your life and the life of those around you. And if you want to create change, please do. But work to create change from a place of loving kindness and compassion, not from hatred and anger and judgment. Because very often the people that you feel should change, that you feel are filled with hatred and anger and judgment, that's all you're throwing towards them. Hatred towards them, anger towards them, and judgment towards them. And this is a hard reality to wake up to. Now we'll justify it and say, well, we're justified. Because they're wrong and we're what? Right. That's what I love about a Buddhist temple, because it's so nice to be in a room filled day in and day out with people who are just right all the time. You know, it's very rare to be surrounded by people who are always right. But, you know, once in a while we pull it off. There's this thing called Buddhist arrogance, and then I'll pause. But it's very common I've found in Buddhism, especially early on, where, you know, you get into meditation and Buddhist practice, you've been doing it for all of like 3 weeks, and all of a sudden you start judging, critiquing everybody else for doing the same stuff you were doing like 3 weeks and a day ago. So just practice. It's not easy. To learn to be kind to yourself and everybody else around you all day long is really, really difficult. But that in essence is the heart of this practice. So we keep practicing. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I always really prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we use the rest of our brief time this evening for questions. To those joining virtually, again, welcome. Glad you're here. Thank you for showing up. Feel free to say hello. If you have any questions, put them on the chat box. I'll do my best to respond. So we'll open up to questions.
Is the goal, or was the goal of Buddha to circumvent or prevent suffering in general because he believed that suffering was inherently evil or bad? I'm not sure if...
Great question. Go ahead. Sorry. Was there more?
Well, like, I think it's kind of inherent to life, you know. If you fall, or if you love someone and they're in pain, you share some of that pain. You then share suffering. Without that, you would lose a beautiful aspect of that love, right? So if you're avoiding suffering in general, you're kind of avoiding being alive.
Yeah, I'm glad you added to that, because, so let me back up. For those who didn't hear it, the question was the goal, I almost cut you off there, but I'm really working at not cutting people off. You know, it's a bad habit of mine. But the first question was, you started by saying, is the goal of Buddhism or Buddhist teachings to not suffer because suffering is evil? I'm kind of paraphrasing what you said. And then your example was, you know, if you love someone and something happens, you know, you're going to suffer, right? So first and foremost, I never like to look at Buddhist teachings as having a goal whatsoever. Because as soon as we set goals, and I'll give kind of some concrete practice to this around Buddhist teachings, but as soon as we set goals and expectations, we're setting ourselves up for what?
Suffering.
Failure, right? Which leads to suffering. So I don't look at Buddhist teachings, his practice at all as a goal. The goal was not to become enlightened. Because if we give this idea of, and there's so many levels to your question, but let me just touch on a couple things. If we give ourselves this idea that we have to have some goal to become enlightened or awakened, that means that we have to get somewhere. And this practice is not about getting anywhere. So I always find it potentially dangerous, not just around this question, but anything. And especially for those who are new to Buddhism, thinking like, okay, well, I need to end suffering tomorrow. I need to enter nirvana next week. You know, this stuff is a day in and day out practice. It's not something that you're just going to accomplish in like 6 months and be like, okay, am I there yet? So I think goals can be very dangerous within Buddhist practice, especially when you're reading about enlightenment, nirvana, and you're like, well, I got to get there, right? Ultimately, there's nowhere to go. Right? The second piece to that I want to touch on, which is really important to understand the context, but to the question around the suffering being evil. So the way you ask it almost made me feel like you think that we just want to get away from suffering, right? But what's the first noble truth? The Buddha said what? Life is filled with suffering. For those who don't know the Four Noble Truths, the first thing the Buddha taught in 30 seconds, the first thing he said is life is filled with dukkha. Translates to suffering, a really terrible translation of the word. It's really discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, things not going your way. There is heavy trauma, heavy stuff goes on in our life, death, loss, real suffering. And then there's your latte wasn't made the right way. You don't like the person who's driving in front of you. You know, your sandwich wasn't cooked perfectly, right? These things are not going to ruin your life, but we experience those things day to day. So there's heavy suffering, heavy dukkha, and also just little stuff, you know. So that's the first noble truth. The second is the cause. He said the cause of our suffering is our greed, our anger, and our ignorance. We always want more. We're angry at the way things are, and we're ignoring reality. The third is there's an ending to suffering, and this is kind of getting to your question. And this is freedom from suffering. The fourth is the path, Eightfold Path, having correct views, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. All on Google for free. And you can literally just Google Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, and you'll know everything the Buddha taught on like one page, right? The question is around the suffering. Too often people jump over the first step. I mean, the Buddha, first thing he said was life is going to be filled with it. But how many of you came here tonight thinking like, I want to embrace all my suffering? Nobody's here tonight because they want to suffer. Was anyone sitting at home and you're like, I just want to keep suffering. I'm going to go to that Buddhist thing tonight, you know? No, but we are suffering. Embrace the suffering. Do not try to get away from it. Because if you try to get away from it, this will sound confusing at first, but I'll eventually make it make sense. If you try to get away from it, you're just avoiding understanding the second noble truth, which is what? The cause of our suffering. We have to understand why we are suffering. And very often, anyone ever here had an addiction to something, right? Healthy or unhealthy, right? We're constantly craving to get away from discomfort. That's what the Buddha taught. Craving and aversion. Avoidance. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral is what he said. So we always want pleasant. We don't want unpleasant. And then there's kind of this neutral space. So we turn to things, healthy or unhealthy, to get away from where we are. I've found it incredibly important to sit with my suffering, to not try to escape from it. It's not evil. He didn't say get rid of it right away. He said you're going to suffer and understand why you're suffering. And then he said there's a path out. But it was the end path, right? Starts with suffering and understanding the cause. Another level to this is we think as Western folks, well, let me ask it this way, because I haven't asked this question in at least 3 weeks. How many of you came here tonight wanting to make sure you don't have a rebirth? No hands, right? Probably wasn't on the invite list, right? Like, hey, what's your name? Christian. Hey, Christian, you want to go to this class tonight? I'm going to make sure you're not reborn, right? That pretty much was not laid out to you, right? Or you definitely would not have been coming here. At the time of the Buddha, when he was teaching, 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ, at that time, as Hindu practitioners, for the most part, all of them believed in rebirth, reincarnation, or continuation of consciousness. If you went up to somebody at that time and said, you got one life and then you're going to heaven or hell, they would have thought you were crazy. You walk up to people today and say you're going to be reborn, and the average Western person is like, what are you talking about? So he was teaching to people at a time where they all believed in rebirth. So really the heart of your question, when you look at it from this context, what he was teaching absolutely was to stop us from suffering. But there was ultimately only one way to end suffering. You know what that was? Not even death. Not being reborn. Because death just guaranteed what? Again, let's all pretend for a moment that rebirth is a thing that happens. For the most part, none of us think that way. But if this was a room filled with people that all understood that rebirth led to, or death led to rebirth, then we would understand that this life, when it dies and is reborn, we're going to suffer. Because once we are born, we are guaranteed to suffer. It doesn't mean all of life sucks. It doesn't mean, that we can't have joy and happiness and excitement. But again, if you showed up here on Tuesday, 7:00, you've already embraced the idea that you're suffering a bit. So we're all going to suffer as soon as we're born. And what he was actually teaching to the disciples at the time, the monks and nuns, was to free themselves from the cycle of rebirth. Because that was the only way to end suffering. to get off of the wheel of samsara, the cycle of rebirth. Again, Western people don't focus on that, don't really care about that. It doesn't make much sense to them. You just want to go through your day and be peaceful and happy without jumping off a cliff. And I mean that literally, right? Think of rebirth as when we're done here, you'll get outside, you'll continue in your day or your night. That's a rebirth. You're going to go to sleep tonight. Maybe well, maybe not well. Maybe we'll all wake up tomorrow. We don't know. There's people going to sleep right now that won't wake up tomorrow. And if we wake up tomorrow, then there's your rebirth. For me as a Westerner, I think of rebirth as every moment we're starting over. And if I want to not suffer in this moment, I have to focus on freeing myself from the cycle of suffering, which includes greed, anger, and ignorance. So if I'm less greedy, I'm less angry, and I'm less ignorant, I'm going to suffer less. But suffering is not evil. And you're absolutely right. When we lose loved ones, when we have breakups, heartache, whatever, if you're not suffering, that there's a real problem there. So the Buddha wanted us to embrace our suffering, become aware of it, I think become friends with it and understand it and not avoid it. Suffering is critical and absolutely going to occur throughout your life. It's what we do with that suffering that determines our mental, emotional state and well-being. So don't avoid it. Don't run from it. Yeah. Does that help? Yeah.
I've heard the term one mind in Buddhism. Is it sort of like leaning towards like a source or a creator or Holy Spirit?
That's super out of context. There, have been thousands and thousands of Buddhist teachers over the years. So I'd have to know what they were referring to. In Buddhism, there's not the source of creator or one God or anything like that. It's an endless continuation of consciousness. The Buddha wasn't a God. He was asked about, again, as Hindus at that time, they asked him if they should believe in gods and goddesses because there were a lot of them. And he said, like, I'm just a dude. He probably didn't say I'm just a dude, but he said, I'm just a human. I'm not a God. So if you believe in gods and goddesses, you do. And if you don't, you don't. That's up to you. He just wanted people to live a peaceful, happy life and be kind. But yeah, one mind, it really just depends on who the teacher was, what lineage they're coming from, and what teachings they received. Yeah.
What's your idea of one mind?
We don't have one mind. I have my mind. You have your mind. That's my idea of one mind. Yeah. I have my one mind and it's a mess. How's your one mind? Also a mess? Sometimes. All right. So I don't want to go anywhere near your mind and you don't want to go anywhere near my mind. Let's each work on our own mind together. There's collective karma, collective consciousness, things like that. That sure, we all have individual consciousness, individual minds, individual karma, and collectively we influence, things. If I hang out with you, then what we do together is going to have an impact, but we're still two completely separate individuals. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, over there. Yeah. Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, she can go first.
I saw your hand first.
Okay. Well,
If you want him to go, I'll let you two fight it out.
This kind of piggybacks on last week is that, the Buddha, or that went out and saw the suffering, and he didn't like what he saw, and so he went on a spiritual journey, a spiritual path, and his path that he, worked on for many, many years, that he got to a point that I don't even know if he cared about, like, if he was living another life. Like, he was just on the path, and the path is like, you get freedom, and the freedom is that you get relief from suffering, or that that suffering is always going to be there, and then you process it, you work through it. So he didn't care about if you lived the next life. I don't know. Am I wrong there?
Well, I never want to touch on what I think the Buddha cared about or didn't care about. Because anyone who leads Buddhist stuff is just making up what they think. And so I can't, but I'm glad you followed it, because I've been talking about you all week, which is great. Your question from last week, because really.
Anyone in the crowd?
What's that?
No, when you tell other people, it's like there's this one girl in the crowd that's just keeps asking this stupid question.
No, it was a brilliant question. I actually was, I realized that what I should have touched on, in addition to what I said, which will play into this, is that and I needed a little more clarity, but when you talked about the emaciated Buddha and kind of starving himself to death, and you made it sound like, to recap briefly, that, one must be a monastic, a monk or nun to go on the spiritual journey. And I challenged you to go give clothes that you have in excess to people. Like, you don't have to be a monk or nun. You just have to take care of others and take care of yourself. But also to understand that at that time, when he was starving himself to death, he was not the Buddha. He was not enlightened, and he was living a very unhealthy way. So the middle path teachings are really important to understand where is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual balance in our lives, right? The other piece, and I'm just taking an opportunity to say what I should have said to you last week, was the first practice of generosity, as the Buddha taught, right? To give people your heart, your smile, your love, your attention, whatever you can, to give loving kindness and compassion to the world includes yourself. And so what I should have said to you, based on, I won't bring it all up again, but when I started with the food example, and I was like, yeah, that's probably not that healthy of a way to go through your day. So the first thing you could be doing as a practitioner to look at Buddhist teachings is to say, how am I going to give myself health? That's important. How am I going to take care of myself? Because if I can't, it's the oxygen mask. If I can't take care of me, how can I take care of anyone else? And again, this has nothing to do with being a monk or a nun or, a lay person. We must give care and love and compassion and kindness to ourselves. That's where it starts. And I think from there, again, I can't touch on what I think the Buddha cared about or didn't care about, but, he clearly believed in a continuation of consciousness. So I can't say that he was sitting there pondering, what that next life would or wouldn't be, even though the ultimate teaching is that at death, there was no more rebirth for him. They say that was his last life. He, in essence, neutralized karma, which is what keeps us on the cycle of rebirth. And he entered into what they call parinirvana, which is nirvana, awakening without any remainder, anything coming back. So it's like a flame. You build a flame out, where's the flame go? That's kind of what nirvana is. Nirvana literally means to extinguish. So there was no consciousness that continued on after that birth is what the technical, scholarly Buddhist teachings are, which is completely irrelevant and meaningless to pretty much all of us in this room, right? We just have to focus on how can we be loving and kind to ourselves and others, Yeah.
So I just have to say first that I'm very new to learning about all this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to seem like I'm judging any of it or critiquing any of it. I'm just wondering a lot of things. And I guess one of the main things that I'm wondering is a little bit based on that first question that I heard earlier. And you were talking about exiting the cycle of rebirth. And I was just wondering, isn't that in a way, not selfish, but kind of taking you away from the future of other things, by exiting that cycle of rebirth, you a animal died and you didn't allow its body to contribute to the nutrients for future plant life in that area, just as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that selfish or from the environment? I don't know.
Yeah. No, beautiful question, man. Beginner's Mind, so much. The great book, Zen Mind, Beginner Mind. And one, to your early comment about, I'm new, and so I don't, mean to sound like I'm judging or critiquing. Please judge, please critique. The Buddha said very clearly, do not believe this stuff just because I'm saying it. Challenge it, question it, try it. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, abandon it. So, the Buddhist teachings very directly, again, as just a human, there's an expression I like in Buddhism that says, don't seek to be like the Buddha, seek what he saw, right? So Buddhism's not trying to make a bunch of little Buddhas running around everywhere, I've been running this place every day for 18 years. We see 600-800 people a week. And a quick show of hands, how many of you in here are Buddhist? How many hands you see up in the air? None. One, and then maybe a half, So, and the half is like, I'm not sure, it's kind of cool, but I don't know. So the Buddhist teachings are not about being Buddhist, nor are they, well, let me just stop there. So that's the first thing. So definitely always challenge and question, especially early on, right? Two, the part about rebirth, which is always the worst place to start for new people, because it's like, what, rebirth? Like, no, I'm good. I'm going to figure out something else. But let me explain that technically. Again, at the time, what they were looking at, and even today, especially within Tibetan Buddhism and other schools of Buddhism, what was continued on to your example about the animal, like stopping it, so the body doesn't vanish and disappear, right? So in the example of a human, what continues on is the consciousness. But so even in your example, you wouldn't be stopping anything. Like even with an animal, when an animal dies, the consciousness would continue on, right? I mean, I'm just literally addressing your question. And the body could still be eaten and consumed or feed the plants or whatever you want. So you're not stopping that process. Second. Third, to your point, which is, again, really beautiful for anyone, there are two major schools of Buddhism. One, a Theravada Buddhism, Southeast Asia initially, the early teachings of the Buddha, of the elders, and then about 500-600 years later, you have development of what's called Mahayana Buddhism. And these two schools, Tibetan Buddhism, really the third, but that is considered Mahayana Buddhism. That school of Buddhism introduces what's called the Bodhisattva Path, which in a weird way kind of addresses exactly what you're saying. In a weird way, meaning like, just, had you ever heard anything I just said? Mahayana, Bodhisattva, you're actually described as the Bodhisattva path. The Mahayana Buddhism, Bodhisattva means enlightened being. The Bodhisattva path is that as one is just about to awaken, enter into nirvana, and be free from the cycle of rebirth, as an example, because we're all so close to that, The idea is that they then make a vow that at their death, they will be reborn to liberate all sentient beings from suffering. So the two schools of Buddhism are not like killing each other over different views, but the different view is one school says, how can I help anyone if I'm not enlightened and if I don't awaken? The other school of Buddhism says, I'm going to help people along the way. And when it comes time close to death, I'm going to vow to be reborn until all beings are free from suffering.
Being that's not suffering here?
No, once you're born, you're still going to suffer. So the Bodhisattva vow, like when you get back tonight, like Google Bodhisattva vow. But the Bodhisattva vow is to be reborn life after life until all sentient beings are suffering. Typically, it's reborn into the human realm. But there's one of the statues up here, Kasidi Garba. His vow was to be reborn into the hell realms. Just to introduce that stuff, because, we're so important also, right? Hell realms, rebirth. Aren't you glad you showed up, man? Yes, Bodhisattva vows to be reborn to free all beings from suffering. But let me bring it back to a practice that I think is relevant. How many of you like to help people? When you wake up tomorrow, help people. That's it. To me, that is 2,500 years of Buddhism summed up, regardless of what school or path that you're on. When you wake up tomorrow, help people, help animals, help all beings, all space, all time, all directions. And at the same time, realize that you also exist. You are there. When early on, especially, Buddhism is fun to look at rebirth and reincarnation and hell realms. It's got all that kind of stuff, truly. But from a practical day-to-day standpoint, for me as a practitioner, I'm not a monk. I'm not a scholar. I don't study Buddhism that way. It's fun the first couple of years for me to wrap my head around it. And then I was like, you know what? I just need to wake up and stop being an asshole. That's what Buddhism taught me. And all the focus on rebirth or reincarnation or where I'm going to go or what I was before or where I'm going to next was like, look, when I wake up tomorrow, I just want to be kinder and gentler than I was the day before. And when I die, which I will, it could be in 10 minutes from now, it could be in 50 years from now, who knows? Maybe we don't know when it is. But when that time comes, for the most part, regardless of what you believe in, what determines where you go? If you believe in heaven or hell, what determines how you get there? Your actions. That to me is the focus. I spend very little time focused on the concept of rebirth and reincarnation. And I've been at this stuff nearly 30 years. So I just focus on what am I thinking? What am I saying? What am I doing right now? Because that's karma. Karma is not what I get. Karma is what I give. We generate karma 3 ways: body, speech, mind. Karma literally means action. So the focus is on body, speech, mind, thoughts, words, and actions. What do I think? What do I say? And what do I do? That whole rebirth thing, all that stuff will take care of itself. But keep reading, man. It's fascinating, especially if you're into all that. Yeah. What else? Yeah. It's a hand in the back there somewhere. Oh, it's a hand. Sorry.
Okay, I'll try to explain this. So if rebirth is...
I thought we were going away from rebirth.
No, this is like helpful because I've been doing this for like 8 years now and I've never once talked about rebirth.
Okay.
So I bring it back to and I don't know if this is like a secular way to look at it.
Yeah, for sure.
Each moment, I guess I talked about nirvana, and so like in the beginning, I thought to reach nirvana, like that's the end goal.
Yeah.
And then a teacher explained to me like you can have moments of nirvana within the day, within moment to moment, because if each moment is like a rebirth, then nirvana is like the cooling of the mind, I guess. And so I can see when I have thoughts, when it feels like a lot of clinging, feels like fire, and so I can like visualize the nirvana as like a cooling.
Yeah.
And that moment is, if I didn't have those moments of nirvana, I wouldn't have the, I guess, faith in the process to keep on this path.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful way to really look at each moment as a rebirth, each day as a rebirth. Every breath, we're different. And with each opportunity, again, to bring it back to kind of add to that on a practical level, how many of you have anger and resentment you've been carrying around for 10 years or 40 years? Wouldn't it be nice to move past that? So maybe it's time, I know it sounds so simple to say, maybe it's time to move past that, but this kind of rebirth opportunity of just saying, here I am, I'm going to be reborn right now in this moment. And I'm going to stop carrying all the anger and resentment and pain and heartache I've been carrying in my heart and mind for the last 30 years. Allow ourselves to be present and appreciate this moment. So yeah, the experiencing, because ultimately nirvana, samsara, the cycle of rebirth, nirvana, the extinguish the cycle, they're the same. So, yeah.
I know we only have 3 minutes.
Yeah, you're good.
I love this question because it's about rebirth.
Next question. Okay.
So, just 2-part question real quick. So, attachment is part of suffering, yeah?
Attachment leads to suffering, yes.
Okay, perfect. So, second half of that question, does that mean if we choose to love, whether it's an animal, human, whatever, you have a dog, you have a boyfriend, whatever, does that mean that you will never reach nirvana or nirvana?
No.
You continue? Okay.
No, good question. So, the question, and it's a really important thing to clarify. So this was a few years ago. I do a lot of interfaith work, and we have a lot of other religions that come here kind of on field trips, high school or college, from various religious faiths. And there was a high school, religious high school, and I'll leave the religion out, it doesn't matter. But they came here and I did a little meditation, a little talk, and then opened up to questions. One of the first questions the person asked was, she said, I'm told that Buddhists can't practice, that Buddhists practice non-attachment, so that means they can't love their mother. And I was like, let me clarify this for you, right? Non-attachment, again, you've heard me say this, but non-attachment is love. Non-attachment doesn't mean, it's not severing, it's not cutting off, it's not detaching. Non-attachment means you absolutely love and appreciate everything and everyone in your life for who and how they are. Anyone here ever loved anything or anyone, but you got some kind of strings attached to that? I love you if you just do everything I want you to do, right? That's love with conditions. That's love with control, love with manipulation, love with expectations. Non-attachment is love without all of that, with just embracing people how they are, right? So you have family members, loved ones, you don't agree with them. Actually, I didn't mean to make that so personal. It just randomly popped up. But when what's that?
I said, do you know me?
Yeah. When I saw your reaction, I knew that hit home. But, so let's just say maybe you have family or loved ones that you don't necessarily agree with. Well, non-attachment would mean you love them. You don't have to agree with them, but you're going to love them without expecting them to be any different from who and how they are. And you're going to love them regardless of how they have treated you or what they've told you or what they've said to you or what they've done to you. Doesn't mean you have to like it. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Doesn't mean it was healthy or good, right? But you love them because this is who and how they are. We can choose to create space and distance. We can love people and still say, I'm never going to see you again, right? But your question around, if you get into relationships with people or animals or whatever it might be, you're going to love them. And when that relationship ends, whether for whatever reason, it's going to hurt. That doesn't mean that you can't have a peaceful, joyful life. If you don't hurt when you lose loved ones, there's something wrong, much deeper. And that pain and sadness that we feel when we have loss is healthy. So we're not trying to be emotionless. This non-attachment is not like, I don't care. The girl came back. I was telling the story about her for years, and then she actually came back a few years later in college, and she was now studying Buddhism. So I'm glad she learned you can love your mother. Yeah. So please love, but understand that with every person, place, and thing that comes into our life, we will lose it at some point in time, and we will hurt when we do, and that's okay. Yeah, we'll do one more. I think there was some more hand here. Yeah.
Doesn't saying that the practice is hard make it harder?
I don't know.
It seems like the subconscious hears that and it just makes it more solidified.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't know. I think the practice is incredibly difficult.
I'm not saying it's easy, but I think saying that it's hard makes it hard.
It is hard.
What I'm saying is repeating that and saying that it's hard.
Yeah. The practice is really easy. Does that help?
Is there a way to make it more fun?
To make the practice more fun? I mean, we're almost out of time. No, I mean, I could say no. I'll close with this. Go ahead, and then I'll close with that. Yeah. Go ahead.
The other day, I heard this on YouTube, so don't take too much stock in it. But it was about achieving things. It was like you have to focus on the result and not the effort. Because as soon as you focus on the effort, you are getting demotivated. But as soon as you focus on the result, suddenly the effort becomes fun because you know what's coming from it. So if you can focus on the result of whatever you're doing, making someone happy, or if you're trying to manage your emotions, you can focus on the result of, oh my God, what could my life be like if I didn't react this way to this person? Then suddenly, it becomes a lot more fun to do it. Yeah,
the joy and the results of seeing. Thank you. Yeah, the joy and results of seeing this practice play out in your life and how that benefits those around you, I think is fun. And the other thing I was going to say, and I'll close with this thought, is that it's important to understand for those who've been at this for a long time or new, is that you don't need to alter, your life doesn't have to drastically change just because you begin to meditate and explore Buddhist teachings and bring this stuff into your life. To me, part of the fun early on was learning to laugh at myself and realize what an idiot I was and still am in many ways.
Your thoughts?
Yeah. And just finding humor in how ridiculous they are. And then to me, that was fun because the alternative was hating myself for having those thoughts. It's like, okay, you grow up angry, depressed, miserable, getting into fights, and that life just sucked. And so all your thoughts were miserable, and that was not fun at all. But just because you meditate and read some Buddhist stuff doesn't mean all of a sudden that changes you. Your mind is still was the same mind. So I had to learn to laugh at that and realize, man, what a mess this is. And become friends with it and find joy in getting to know that mind. And then from there, seeing how every aspect of your life, from, school, work, relationships, whatever it might be, traffic, food, all that stuff, how the teachings of generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom, how the teachings of loving kindness and compassion, forgiveness, how that plays into your life, I think is exciting. It's like, wow, I can keep everything I'm doing in my life and just alter how I behave. And to me, that makes life better. And, I think making life better is fun. So it doesn't mean you have to close off your life. It's not going to happen. But yeah, I mean, in a way, it's the same thing you just said. Like, the end result is, how can I make life better for me and those around me? That's the result. That's what you're working towards. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to work towards. And but be patient, and especially those who are brand new to Buddhist stuff. This is a lot to take in. It's a lot to explore. It can take a couple years, truly, to where this stuff really begins to settle and make a difference in your life. But, if you've been one way for a very long time, it takes more than 3 weeks to shift that, so just be patient with yourself and keep practicing. It's really easy. Join palms. Many merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. All right, a few quick announcements from our Dharma Bum host, Eddie, before you all head out.
Hello, everyone. I am tonight's host, Eddie. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you're done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people can stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.